I've been doing this podcast. This is like episode, I've already forgotten, 20 something, and I still don't have like a standard intro that I do. I just kind of, we just like edit it right in at the beginning, and now we're going. So I will say that this is a new episode of Aaron's Indie View, and I am speaking with writer and artist. And do you letter your own comics too?
I do. Yep.
Oh, right on. Yeah, you do it all.
Yep.
I am speaking with David Whalen,
Yep.
indie comic book producer extraordinaire.
Yeah. Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, it's good to talk to you. One of the common topics that I talk about with a lot of creators on this podcast is social media, and how much I hate it, but how much it's also not just needed, but also how actually valuable it is. And so you and I are somebody who who connected just almost completely out of the blue on social media. I guess we'd gotten to be friends on Facebook at some point. I'm sure like yourself, my Facebook friends list has just exploded with thousands of people that are just kind of in the indie comic community. Yep. But because of the way their algorithm works, you don't always see the stuff that everybody's posting. Like, you know what I mean? So like, I'm friends with people that I didn't even realize I was friends with, that I've been talking to them afterwards, and I'm like, oh, we're already friends on Facebook, whatever. But I think
that damn algorithm will get you every time. Won't it?
I know.
Yeah.
So I think we had come cross paths on a post about podcasts and stuff, and I haven't really put out a lot of wide nets inviting people onto the show, just because like I know so many people. Like this whole year has just been full of just people that I've known, but I do kind of have an open invitation to anybody that wants to be on the show. But you were one of the few that responded to that, so thank you for doing that.
Happy to.
Yeah,
I love podcasts like this, to be able to meet new people and be able to talk to new people and hear different ideas. I love the fact that in all of the negativity of the COVID stuff that's happening, I think this is one positive that a lot of people are being able to communicate on like this that haven't been able to or weren't doing before all the weirdness. So out of that negative comes, I think, a pretty solid positive. People that I probably would have never met before all this weirdness happened. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think so too. I also think that I find it's easier to get I mean, this may seem really obvious, but it's easier to get like a real handle on somebody and a feel for them just by talking with them face to face versus just communicating with like seeing what they post or what they respond to like on other people's posts. Like, I do think you get kind of a distorted perception of somebody's personality just based off of social media stuff.
100%.
Yeah, so that's why I like doing this podcast. It's just nice to actually connect with creators. And after all the quarantines and stuff, I haven't been able to go to any cons or like go see anybody or talk to anybody. So yeah, that's exactly what this is about. Just
where are you, Aaron? I think you told me, but I have forgotten.
I'm in St. Louis, Midwest America.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and you're in New York?
Upstate New York. Yep,
yeah,
upstate New York. Yeah.
Cool.
And I just had the first con since all the weirdness started.
I saw that. I wanted to talk to you about that.
Yeah, it went really well. It was awesome.
Oh, that's good. Was it a good crowd?
It was a good crowd. I kept hearing from some of the people, the organizers, that if the Canadian border was still open, it probably would have been double the amount. And that's kind of like a double-edged sword kind of thing, because the country's still dealing with all the COVID stuff. I think people have thought that it's done, and then it's kind of started creeping back up again.
Yeah.
So for me, who is a teacher and does kind of come into contact with people who are probably pretty susceptible to COVID, that was like, oh, I think this is a good crowd, and any more would probably be a little bit too much of a crowd at this point, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's going to be the tricky thing now, is juggling crowds, because
exactly.
I mean, that's like just thinking back to cons that I've gone to just a few years ago. It's like so many people, and it's like I would get anxiety just being in a room full before COVID, just like when you're just like shoulder to shoulder with people like in a crowd, it's already uncomfortable. And now you add on all of this stuff, it's like
At the middle of a pandemic, and some people thought it was the end of a pandemic, and
Yeah.
started doing just normal things again, and
Hmm.
not protecting each other and themselves, and it just kind of made it a little worse here. But I think we'll be okay. I think we'll hopefully by the end of this year, if people continue to, protect each other, we'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a pretty optimistic person
Mhm.
in general about this
Yeah.
kind of stuff. How did you do at the con, like comparatively? Did you do all right?
Yeah, like I said, good crowd. Lots of like I said, I'm an elementary teacher, so I tend to get a lot of kids
Hmm.
coming up to my booth, and I'll draw with them, and some kids will just randomly ask me, hey, like last this weekend, she was probably 14 years old, and she just came up and randomly asked me, how do you draw noses? So we sat, and I said, "Oh, I've got paper right here. I always make sure I have paper and markers and all that stuff
Hmm.
with me." And just gave her a piece of paper, and we sat and we drew noses for 10, 15 minutes, and their parents came up and said, "Okay, well, let's leave them alone."
Stop
Um,
bothering him.
yeah, I said, "Oh, you're not bothering me. Just buy a book." And they did not, but that's okay.
Ah,
Um,
that's
but it was still good. Most of the people that came up and we talked, and that are standing there for more than 3 or 4 minutes talking about anything pop
Mhm.
culture or comic books or whatever it is, usually buy something, and I did pretty good. I did pretty good. I was happy with the situation.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of hoping with like some conventions starting up again. I haven't done any. There was just one here in Kansas City this weekend also. That's a
Mhm.
pretty big one
Yeah.
for the Midwest. Probably as big as you're going to get in this area that's not Chicago.
Sure.
Uh, and so I think that went really well for everybody. And so I was hoping that there was probably going to be this sense of restlessness with a lot of people. Like they've been shut in for a year and a half. They just want to get out and do something and
Mhm.
perhaps also spend some money.
Sure. Hopefully.
It's like they haven't had anything to do. So I, it seemed like that was definitely the sense I was getting from a lot of people just talking about like that's probably part of the reason they want things to open so badly. And
Yeah.
there's this kind of that little bit of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Like it's not exactly the end, but
Yeah, enough to where people feel comfortable on some level, and I think for people who have been vaccinated, I think it's okay. I'll have my mask around my neck, and if
mhm,
I feel like it's starting to get a little tight, I'll just pop it up again,
yeah.
up over my face, and I think that's what most people are doing now at this point, and just
Hmm.
like I said, just trying to be safe, trying to make sure you get out of this thing okay,
Yep.
uh, and then people at the con this weekend were. I did notice a lot of masks from older people, young alike, and everybody in the middle. So again, while still being there and still looking at all the pop culture and all the awesomeness and spending money and getting out
Hmm.
there doing something, still trying to make as many precautions as I could.
Well, the nice thing about comic conventions is that it seems like that would be a good place to easily incorporate masks into cosplay. It just seems real
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I did see a little bit of that where somebody walking around with Batman would wear like have a rebreather on, but
Yeah.
it was clearly just a mask, and he'd pull it down to be able to talk to people
Yeah.
and be able
Yeah.
to see us time to time. But yeah, it's awesome stuff. I mean, a real chance to show some creativity.
Cool. Cool. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your books? Like what I mean, I know I announced you as a writer and artist, but I took a little bit of look at your website. It was Correct Hand Comics,
Yes,
right? Is that
correct-handed
correct?
comments. That's
Is
it.
that because you're left-handed?
I am correct-handed. Yes, I'm left-handed.
Do you draw left-handed?
I do everything left-handed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so like, what kind of stuff do you do then?
So I have my ongoing series, The Offspring. I just put out issue 16, and I'm working on 17. 17. I'm actually about halfway through already. I put out 16 about 2 weeks ago,
Oh, wow.
and decide was going to take like 2 or 3 days to really just kind of rest my arm and all that. And about a day into it, I said, I'm ready. I've got the thumbnails. Let's just do it. And but in that 2 or 3 days of luckily having time, my wife and kids giving me time to do it, I've almost got the half of the thing inked. So so I'm really flying through. I'm trying to get it done before school starts next week,
Yeah.
and we'll see if that happens. I don't know.
Deadline crunch.
Yeah, but The Offspring is my ongoing series, and my plan is to get to issue 50 whenever I get to it. Like I said, I'm right in the middle of issue 17, so I'm doing pretty good on getting those issues out. And it is my ongoing series. I call it Action Adventure Creatures and Chaos. It's kind of a when I came up with the idea 25 years ago, so a long time ago, and it's had enough time to be able to gestate to really become something that I think is nice and solid, a nice solid story with good solid characters that act like real people. When I came up with the story, I wanted to see a couple things. I wanted to see people who were having struggles of friends and family that I saw growing up, and things that we usually weren't touched on in comics. Now maybe a little bit more, but still not as much as maybe they should be, to be able to include those kind of struggles for kids to be able to read in. But also, I wanted to make sure that I had something that was action filled with powers. But I like to make the joke that I came up with no flights, no tights, the Smallville like mantra, no flights, no tights.
Yeah.
I came up with that 20 years before they did.
Yeah.
Because when I originally designed these characters, there was costumes and there was code names, and somewhere on the line I said, I'm not going to do any of the costumes or code names. They're just people, and they're just trying to get by, trying to fight their way through the world when my three main characters were abused physically and mentally by their parents or their loved ones, and they meet up at this alternative school, an orphanage, and they come to realize that they're not only linked by their past, by their abusive past, but they're also linked together by powers that they share that they can't quite control. And as the series goes on, I to kind of slowly roll out. I'm trying not to get it all out too fast because I have 50 issues that I want to be able to slowly get to know these characters. They start to realize that they're not only connected with these powers and their past, but they also seem to be connected with all these monsters and creatures and things that keep kind of like ramming into them like magnets, and come to find out that as the three of them start to get closer mentally to each other as friends, but also physically, like starting to gain a mental connection with each other, they realize that the three of them should be four, and that they're missing a friend that was kind of lost to the universe. And the first 13 issues are kind of introduce them and their powers and their problems and their character, and then I start to sprinkle in that the three should be four and that they're missing somebody. So the issue 14 opens up as a time travel story to be able to try to figure out what happened to this missing member, and it's a time travel story into the Civil War, which is one of my favorite eras that I've been studying for 25 years, and really love the idea of having these three contemporary characters who remember their lives in the 21st century, but also it's kind of like a Quantum Leap inspired kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah.
They have their memories, they're leaping into, or they're time traveling into themselves, because, and then I explained it through the book, that they travel through time together, and each new life they kind of converge on each other, for reasons that you can read in the book. But as they converge on each other in the Civil War era, they're kind of melding in their brains their Civil War selves and their contemporary selves. So it's really fun to be able to kind of play with that idea of partly contemporary brains, partly Civil War brains, seeing all this horrible stuff happening to them, and then having to deal with the big bad guy who is trying to kill them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man. Do you have the whole thing plotted out for 50 issues, or is it just kind of a rough idea that you had?
I do. I plotted out is a strong word. But rough idea is not quite there either. It's I've got a pretty planned out, but loose enough to where if I'm working through issue 25 and I think, I wake up in a cold sweat from a dream and go, that's a better idea, then I can easily incorporate those kind of things into the story. It's happened over the first 16 issues where I said, oh, that's a better idea. I think I can make that work. Let me try to adjust it to be able to get that idea into the book. And it's something that one of the reasons I love doing it is because it's mine. I can do whatever I want with it, and in the hope that I enjoy it, in the hopes that other people will enjoy it. And that's the whole thing.
Yeah,
to do a book that I know that I would want to pick up.
Is this the first comic that you've done, like written and drawn?
Written and drawn where it was specifically mine, yes. I did do some small press stuff, and it was the thing that kind of catapulted my confidence
Hmm.
into just saying, "Well, why am I trying to find these small press companies to hone my skills? I think I've got it. I'm going to start doing it myself." But
Yeah.
without those small press companies, I don't know if I would have had the confidence to be able to do it. So it was a great learning experience for 2 or 3 years, working on some 8-page stuff for anthologies, working on an issue here, an
Hmm.
issue there for these small press books that I would kind of find and contact and say, hey, I'm ready to put together some work, some content.
Hmm.
And about, like I said, about 2 or 3 years into that, I said, I think I got it. I'm gonna make my own company and get it going.
Yeah,
And
no, that's good.
here we are. Yeah.
When did you start doing comics?
To be able to actually be printed, I'd say probably 8 or 9 years ago.
Okay.
For the first one that I actually had printed that wasn't I had published, that wasn't something that I had done on my own or stapled in my bedroom as a 13-year-old and handed it out to all my buddies.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'd say probably 9 years ago,
Okay.
something like that. And I don't even know if you could find any of that stuff now. It might still be on Amazon, but I'm not sure. I don't know.
Yeah. When did you start doing the Offspring then?
So, like I said, I had the concept for many, many, many years. I'd say I started 6 years ago,
Okay.
7 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. Could probably nail it down if I thought a little bit more about it. But 17 issues
Now, I was
in
gonna say that's
six
pretty good.
years. That was
Working
pretty
at
good.
an
I'll
indie
take it.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah, 17 issues in that. I like, how often do you put out an issue?
I try to my plan is always 6 issues a year.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
do
Wow.
bi-monthly.
Yeah.
Sometimes it doesn't happen. I think one year I was able to get 5 out, but
Hmm.
I was still okay with that.
No,
It
that's
was
still pretty productive.
yeah, and still be able to get out. I have some one shots that I put out, that from beginning to end of a one shot will, and I've got 4 of them out right now, and hopefully we can talk about those in a minute. But
Hmm.
I can get those out from beginning to end. I can get that done in about a month. The one shots aren't colored; they're black and white.
Okay.
So a little bit quicker of a turnaround to be able to have those black and white. And I try to make sure that the black and white is there for a reason, not just because it's an indie book that I want to get out fast, but
Yeah,
also
not just
uh,
being cheap.
yeah, be a part of why it's
Hmm.
black and white, and I think it works out pretty well usually.
Yeah, cool. So you these one shots that you're talking about, are those different from the Offspring?
Yes, they are. I am a bit of an OCD, so as far as my
Hey,
writing goes, I
preaching to
love
the choir over here.
yeah, I love every kind of genre, from sci-fi to romance to horror to superhero to
Hmm.
pick a genre. I'm fine with it. And if I can find a hook that I think is something interesting or something that I'd never seen before, I'll write it down and then start drawing it. So my first one shot that I put out, and I realized that as an indie creator, a lot of people are maybe a little weary of picking up an ongoing series to start off with because you never really know. Um, at this point, I don't think I could physically stop myself from actually creating these books.
Yeah, yeah.
So like I said, 50 is quicker, that is going to come around quicker than I think, hopefully.
Hmm.
But I wanted to be able to give the readers kind of a bridge to be able to see my style and my stories and my the way that I write and draw, and hopefully that will, like I said, be a bridge to picking up the Offspring. Well, I really like this story. That's a one shot. Let's see what happens, with a more ongoing story, a more serialized story.
Hmm.
So with my first one, I put out, I had a couple ideas of which one shot I wanted to put out first, but I came up with this idea about called Shady Lady, and it was kind of like a take on some of the weird things that have been happening socially, politically over the last few years. And I wanted to wrap kind of like a film noir, like a Twilight Zone type, Alfred Hitchcock Presents type story, that was a little dark, but also had some social relevance to it. I
Hmm.
wanted to tell a story with a strong female character, and as you go through the story, you kind of get to know the character, the strong female character who I never name because I think that's fun.
Yeah,
Because you could turn her into anybody, you can turn
right.
it into yourself, and I kind of wanted to have a character that was very highly flawed, but a character that also knew the difference between right and wrong,
Mm-hmm.
and not feelings, and knew the difference between feelings and facts,
Mm-hmm.
and knew that she could handle herself in any given situation, no matter what it was. So the first part of the book is kind of these little snippets of interaction between the public and some people making bad choices, and her stepping in and fixing those choices for them, in some cases by force. And as you go through the story, you start to realize that she also has some pretty big issues that she's dealing with, why she's doing the things she's doing, and how it kind of all comes to a crash at the end. So it was my introduction to the one shots that I thought was really fun. No fights, no tights, no powers or anything like that. I thought it was just a solid story to be able to tell with a very sympathetic character that people could have empathy for, and that those are the were kind of the stories that I wanted to tell. So my next one shot I put out, it was I always told myself I wasn't going to do a superhero because it's already kind of been done to the ground, and
Indie
it's really hard.
superheroes especially
Yeah, it's
are
hard.
very a hard sell.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, because you've the big boys are doing that already.
exactly.
So, but I figured with a one shot, something that I could do in 23 pages, and I had a good idea that I had never seen before, and it's called I Won't Stop. And it's about a hero that through tragedy decides to forego his normal life and only be the superhero 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then how it affects the people around him, but really how it affects him mentally, to where it starts to break him down physically and mentally, and it creates an incident
Hmm.
that causes him and the public to rethink who he is, and why he's doing the things he does. So with those first two one shots, it really gave me that jump to be able to continue with one shots, and I can keep going if you want me to keep talking about the one shots. I
No,
can keep it
I
up.
mean, how many did you do?
Four. I've got four out right
Four,
now.
and you're doing these while you're also doing the
Yes.
Offspring.
Yeah.
Man, you're one productive guy.
I try. Organization is always the key.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I think that's pretty smart too, though, what you said about like having the one shots as a way to
Mhm.
not just introduce people to your style, but also it just has something at like when you're at a convention that you can sell,
Exactly. Yeah.
to get people to maybe feel like less of a commitment.
Exactly.
I do think that's something that a lot of creators have to, if they don't stumble over it, like they have to deal with it at some point. Like,
Mhm.
because like my first series that I did was a series called Zero's Heroes,
Mhm.
and that was like an ongoing superhero comedy that I was doing.
Yeah.
And the problem I ran into, which is the problem that everybody said I would run into, which is I do it for so long, and then it's like I've got 3 trade paperbacks worth of material, and it's like all the best stuff I think is in the 3rd trade paperback. But when I'm at a convention trying to sell somebody, I'm like, here's my newest stuff. And they're like, well, I don't want to read 3 without reading number 1.
Exactly.
And I'm like, yeah, you should. But also it's not as good as 3. Like as a creator, I'm like, I know, like it's
Oh
not
yeah,
as good.
that's something. Yeah, I think on some level everybody, but I've kind of in the same boat. When I started this series, you're gonna grow and you're gonna get better at it, and you're gonna all the
Right.
little, you flip through volume 1 and you're like, oh, I could have done that or this or that. But for me, it's really hard not to look back, and I've pondered, should I go to those inks for issue 1 and do something, you know what I mean, like
Yeah.
do something, or the lettering, or do something with it. But I always come back to no, because I want to continue moving forward.
Yeah.
So I kind of have the same thing. I would say that while I'm very proud of every aspect of my book, the volume 3 with issues 11, 12, and 13, I think are the best looking books I've ever put out. I
Mm-hmm.
did everything. The pencils, the inks, the writing, the letters, the colors, and I think it's a good looking book.
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same boat, to where I say, if you get to if you get to volume 3, it's the best books I've ever put out, but you have to read 1 through 10
Right.
first, to be
Right.
able to understand what's happening in the story. I try really hard issue to issue to be able to break down what's happening,
Hmm.
and as quickly, as succinctly as I can for readers to be able to, maybe just jump on board, or the hopes to be able to say, oh, I want to read that. Let me read this one right here and enjoy it, but let me go back and read, those other issues later on.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely a struggle, and that's one of the reasons why I put out the one shots, because it does give them that opportunity to be able to see a representation of me and my work.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, what so with your series, The Offspring, what like what genre would you say it primarily occupies?
That's an excellent question. I would say that it's an action thriller.
Okay.
But when I created it, I knew that I wanted to, again, being my OCD self, I wanted to be able to create something that I knew I could adjust and do levels of genres.
Mm.
It can turn into a romance, it can turn into a sci-fi, it can turn into a horror story, it can turn into really anything. Like I said, the first 13 issues, the first 4 issues, the first 4 issue story arc was very much like an X-Files type supernatural type of story, but very grounded in, I feel, very grounded in reality,
Hmm.
to be able to kind of deal with, for these kids to be able to deal with their past and their abuse that they've had to deal with. So it's not only dealing with supernatural cult type things, it's also dealing with these 320 somethings who do not play well together, but have known each other for 10, 11 years in some cases, but know that they're connected more than just that they grew up in the same orphanage.
Yeah.
So it really is character driven, but it has those aspects of monsters can pop up at any time. And then when, getting into the later half of that run, for my omnibus, I put out issues 1 through 13. The issues 11, 12, and 13 are very much more cosmic,
Hmm.
because we start to learn why they're connected, why they have these powers. What are the ghoulish, godlike creatures kind of lurking in the shadows, why they're doing it, and it kind of blows up into kind of Clash of the Titans type thing. So
Yeah.
it really was a concept for me that I said, I know that I need to be able to have a concept to be able to cross genres. And
Hmm.
for me, The Offspring is exactly that.
Oh, that's cool. I think that's really impressive that you jumped into this with like kind of a rough 50 issue plan, and to be able to stick with it is impressive in and of itself, but also to be flexible with it,
Yeah.
I that's I think that's one of the things that makes comic books great.
Mhm.
I think is like as a creative field is that you can just have a single creator and just kind of let them loose and go, and they can
Yeah.
kind of like jump around wherever they want to go, but
Yeah.
it can still work because it's coming from one creative. It's not like a
Yeah.
bunch of different people coming in and like now we're going to do a comedy version, and then somebody else comes in and it's like now we'll do horror. Like
Yeah.
there's that singular voice that can kind of tie
Exactly.
it all together.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's cool, man. So have you always been somebody that's like into comics? Like when do you remember when you first read a comic book?
Yeah, I do. I went to my older brother and I, he's 2 years older than me. We would ride our bikes through the small town just out of Dayton, Ohio that we lived in. And I have 5 brothers and sisters, so we're a
Mm-hmm.
big family. My brother and I are the 2 oldest. So by the time we got to my littlest brother, who's, I say little brother, but he's 36 now. By the time he came around, my older brother and I, my parents were like, just don't break anything.
Yeah.
Go, just go. This was the early mid 80s.
Hmm.
So in a completely different time. So we would jump on our bikes and we would go, and
Hmm.
we would find ourselves halfway across town. And there was a place that we would go called the coin shop. And my brother would look at all the baseball cards. And in the corner, if you had to dig a little deep for them, because nobody ever looked at them, or at least I didn't see anybody else looking at them, there was a stack of like 60s, 50s, 60s, and 70s Archie comics,
Oh,
Mighty
cool.
Mouse, yeah, that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
would pick those up and I would read through them. And the old guy in the back, if you're gonna read them, you gotta buy them. And
Yeah.
I just they were 10 cents, and
Yeah.
I had a job doing it as a paper boy since I was 9 years old, so I had money in my pocket. I'm like, yeah, I'll buy these. So bought a stack of Archie comics, and then started really looking for read them through as quickly as I possibly could, and started looking for different kinds of comic books, and that's where I found Spider-Man and Superman and those back issues from the 50s and 60s of Superman with the Super Family and Mon-El first coming around and all that stuff, and I would find that and make my parents wouldn't do it because they had other kids to younger kids to have to worry about. But I would find myself in my grandparents' car from time to time and say, "Hey, Grandma, there's a comic book shop right around the corner. Can we go real quick?" And she'd, "Oh, okay." And she'd roll in, and all my brother, if any of my brothers, sisters were in the car, they're like, "Oh, we don't want to do that." I'm like, "I'll be 5 minutes, I promise." So they would. She'd let me run in there, and then they were 25 cents.
Yeah.
You could buy a stack of them for
kids could afford them back then.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very early on. I'd say I was probably 8, 9 when the collection started coming, to the point where my parents said, "Stop buying comics. You're spending too much money on comics," and then I would have to sneak it, and that's their fault for telling me not to buy comics.
That's right. Oh, that's funny. Do you have like a favorite comic book? Like, is there one that's like still stuck with you through this whole time?
So I can remember reading through different books, like Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I can remember Superman. I can remember reading that book over and over and over again, because it was a kind of a vignette of different stories about Superman, but kind of wrapped it all up at the end there. I can remember reading that over and over and over. And Superman, I would say, is it's a little cliche at this point, but he's the guy. He's the guy. You can't deny it.
He's the first superhero.
Exactly. He can't help.
Everything's based off of him.
Exactly. You can't help but admire that while people have tried to change him over the last 75 years, you can't, because he's Superman.
Yeah.
So and then it was funny when Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out. I had heard rumblings that it was the John Walker story of Captain America, Steve Rogers quitting and John Walker taking over, and I had read that Captain America No More series. It was the group of books that I would take on road trips, and I would read through those over and over and over and over again. And about a year before even Falcon and the Winter Soldier was announced, I was like, I need to find that series of books again. And I would go to cons, and I would go to bookstores, and I try to find, and eventually found the group of 7 or 8 books that told that beginning story of John Walker. And then when I found out that the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was going to have John Walker in it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
So those kind of storylines. I was a bigger DC guy, though, honestly, than a Marvel guy. But I picked up some Spider-Man and some Captain America on the way. Never an X-Men guy, though.
Really? I was gonna ask about that with like the description you've been giving me about the Offspring. Like, I can't help but draw some X-Men parallels there.
I would say X-Men, Teen Titans.
Teen Titans, obviously. The teenager.
But never was an X-Men. Know them all. As characters, yes, I get the allure. I've never been an X-Men guy. I don't know why.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm very heartened.
I just lost half my audience. So
possibly, I don't know. X-Men fans are kind of weird and also really picky. Because like I'm an X-Men fan, but like I've met other people who are also X-Men fans, and we are like polar opposites. Like, they like all the books that I hate, and I like all the books that they hate, and I'm just like, oh my god, we're both fans of the same fandom, but we're totally on opposite sides.
And that's one of the things. You can like a character but not like the storyline, or like the storyline but not like the character. And with so much to choose from, it's 100% likely that somebody could like I would say my second favorite character is Blue Beetle, Ted Kord Blue Beetle.
Oh yeah.
And boy, if he is not put into a CW series at some point, I'm gonna be angry.
It feels like Blue Beetle is like the one character that's like ready. I don't know if like DC doesn't believe in the character, but it just feels like it's time to go with the blue. Like, there's so much you could do with the Blue Beetle. I know that's like DC's always got to be doing something Batman related. Everything's got to be Batman, but like if Marvel if Marvel Studios taught us anything, is that you can take an unknown character, and if done right, like Iron Man, you can literally spawn a billion-dollar franchise. And I do think that Blue Beetle could easily do that.
It kind of made me mad. As I get older, I start to realize that the CW books or CW shows, I'm not really in the demographic.
Right.
But I try to watch it, and sometimes I enjoy them, sometimes I don't. But a show like Legends of Tomorrow, which I really enjoyed in the beginning, they're looking for that tech guy, and I just kept thinking, and they would drop Cord Industries, the name Cord Industries from time to time, like, oh yeah, here it comes, it's happening, it's gonna happen. And then 3 years later, nothing. But always looking for that tech guy to fix the ship, or to be the guy that fixes the whatever it is. Ted Kord is just such an obvious choice to me, and I don't know why they don't trust the character enough, and trust us as the hardcore fans to be able to go, finally, Ted Kord, let's get it going and give him his own series.
Right. Or even if they just do like something with Blue Beetle and Booster Gold, like something. Like there's so many options there of how you want to do it.
Oh yeah, like, and I keep hearing the rumors about like a Lethal Weapon type buddy movie with Ted and Michael, and I think it's a good idea, as long as they don't make Ted and Michael the butt of the joke. It can be it can be funny, great. It can be funny, but still. True, and I'm not one of those guys that, I can't believe they did that in this movie to that. I'm not one of those guys. I don't care, tell your story. But to do it, it'd have to kind of draw the line of making jokes, but not having Ted and Michael be the butt of the joke.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. That's my criticism, I think, actually, of a lot of people when they do superhero or even like just even sci-fi stuff these days. Everything has to be kind of like meta, but in a way where they're like, yeah, we know it's stupid, but we're doing it anyway, and let's just laugh at how stupid it is. And I'm like, no, just own it, just go for it. You don't like, we can acknowledge that it's silly and still like it, and you don't have to point out that that it's silly. Just go with
it.
The
gold standard for that, again, not to come back to him, is the original Superman movie.
Exactly.
It had funny parts. Once he hits Metropolis, the jokes start flying. But you still, once he rolls out of that rolling door, and he comes out, and the guy's like, that's a bad outfit. You're laughing, but you're taking it seriously.
Yeah.
Who's got me? You've got me. Who's got you? While the joke is there, it's still taking the character seriously.
Yes.
And I think that's something that they miss. It could be hit and miss. And it could be just Richard Donner or I can't remember Puzo's first name, but clearly coming from the standpoint of The Godfather, you can write a serious script and still have jokes in it. You can take characters seriously, and still tell jokes in the process. And I think that's something that a lot of people maybe miss at this point.
I think it's something in the culture currently. Like everybody's a little too self-aware about everything, and everybody's afraid to be earnest. Just to be just earnest and authentic, and everything has to be like you're putting on not a costume. Like, I'm gonna do this genre now, and it's gonna be my costume, and I'm acknowledging that it's a costume and it's silly, but let's all have fun with that. And it's like, no, just be the thing. I listen to a lot of different types of music, and I love a lot of experimental indie, smart guy, whatever music. But sometimes I like to just listen to a metal band that's just all in on being a metal band, and they just own it. And it doesn't have to be like a meta concept of what a metal band would be like if they, it's just like, no, they're just a metal band and they play metal, and it's awesome.
Just play it loud.
Yeah, exactly.
Play it loud. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's totally 100%.
Yeah. So, with going back to the Offspring, like this book that you do, so what would you say is like your biggest inspiration as a writer, like for this?
Like I said, I try to have the experience to be able to cross genres from time to time. While it's always an action thriller, I think that for me, the influences come depending on the story arc for those characters. Like I said, the one I just did for issue 15, 16, and 17. I'm sorry, 14, 15, and 16 was the time travel story into the Civil War. And I would say that some of my influences were all the time travel stories that we Time After Time, the Time Machine, Quantum Leap was a big one for me growing up, and to be able to kind of find that tone.
Yeah.
And have it still, even though it's that influence, still being able to move my story forward. For me, it's finding those influences in each individual story arc, rather than the whole thing, rather than the whole book itself. But keeping that grounding concept of action thriller is always going to be there. But then knowing that like we were talking about, kind of sliding in jokes there. There was one of the books I had an ending. I love the big reveal ending, or the thing that's going to make them want to come to the next issue. And I tried something a little bit different with issue 16, which was the end of the time travel story in the Civil War. And there's going to be more time travel later, but this was like the introduction, letting the audience know there's going to be some time travel. So so at the end of that story arc for time travel, I ended it a little bit different than I normally would. I ended kind of with a serious tone, joke, serious tone. And I never ended a book with a joke on the last page before. And my editor and I talked, we kind of went back and forth. Is this the right place for this joke? Should I make this joke here? Should I, whatever? And then I realized that it wasn't me making the joke. It was the character in the book who is the picture, the inappropriate person that that is always inappropriate, that always tells the joke at the wrong time, that always puts their foot in their mouth. That's this character who's telling this joke at the end of this book. And I said, I'm not just telling a joke. That character is doing what that character does.
Yeah.
So once I kind of realized that in my brain, I was 100% okay with that joke being on the end of the book. And then it's the tone drops and he says, now we got to go do the thing.
Yeah.
So it was something that I tried a little bit different and went back and forth because I'd never done it on an end page before. And once I realized that it was 100% in character for Vince, for the character in the Offspring, then I was like, yeah, the tension washed away. I'm like, yep, this is what's happening. It was great. So for me, it's finding those places to be able to use those different influences. For me, for some of my jokes, I guess they kind of feel maybe kind of Monty Python-esque.
Okay.
On some level, big Monty Python fan.
I love Monty Python.
Brian, Holy Grail, love it. And then I'll find myself realizing I'm kind of making a Laugh-In. That's a very dated reference for a lot of your offense, I'm sure, but Laugh-In, Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. Finding places to be able to like boom, drop it in and then pull back again to be able to keep the thing going. So I would say for comedy, those are probably my biggest influences, while still trying to make sure I'm keeping the tone of whatever the action or whatever the thing's going. But being able to drop it in there to be able to help again with the characterization of some of these characters in the book.
Who would you say is your biggest inspiration artistically in your drawing style?
That's a good one. I would say that I don't do a lot of like hatching and cross hatching in my style. It's more solid shapes. While I do have thinner lines, but then this artist, but I would say Frank Miller is a big influence on me.
Sure.
I think that my style is kind of in between realistic and cartoony. There's a middle ground in there that I found that I really enjoy, and I think it works well with most of my stories that I write.
He kind of had like a style that really evolved over time, where he started kind of in that more realistic
in the Daredevil
house style on Daredevil, and then as he started freeing himself up more and more, you got into the Sin City, and then when you get to Dark Knight Strikes Again, he's like all on, like it's not even trying to weigh it in reality. He's just like
you wouldn't even think
cartooning.
Yeah, you wouldn't even think that the Man Without Fear and the Batman Strikes Again were the same. You would think they might be influenced or influence
Yeah.
each other in some way, but you wouldn't even think that they were the same artist if he
Hmm.
wasn't Frank Miller. But I would say my biggest influence as a writer and an artist was Dan Jurgens.
Oh yeah,
Is
okay.
Dan Jurgens,
Yeah.
and his writer and artist of Superman and
Hmm.
Death of Superman, Funeral for a Friend, Return of
Sure.
Superman, all that stuff. Created Booster Gold.
Yeah.
He created a smattering. I believe that he was influential in the Amalgam series also after DC and
Hmm.
Marvel did their fight with
I
each other.
I was buying those issues when they came
Yeah,
out. I
loved
got
it.
way
Loved
into
it.
that.
Oh yeah, loved it, loved it. But he was a big influence on me, and one of the people that made me realize, oh, I can, if I'm gonna create comic books and I'm just an artist, that kind of pigeonholes me into this corner.
Hmm.
So if other people are writing and drawing, I better learn how to write. And I was probably 15, 16 at this
Hmm.
point. Um, so I started reading a lot more, not just comic books, but every kind of book that I could find, and whether it was classics or trying to understand at this point in high school, trying to understand things like Shakespeare, or, all those hoity-toity things,
Yeah.
but also really kind of diving into my own writing, not for comic books, but just to write.
Hmm.
And then realizing that now, getting to a level where I could combine the two, and started coming up with stories. Nothing that I would publish at that point, obviously, but something that I knew, and that's about that time that I kind of came up with the Offspring. So while in my 20s, drawing comic books was still there. I wasn't writing it, but unbeknownst to myself, I was kind of writing The Offspring
Hmm.
for a 10-year period before I was ready to actually publish it, and
Yeah.
it got me here. So I couldn't be happier about
That's
it.
cool. So
Yeah.
you came to comics as an artist,
Yes.
and then because you wanted to do your own thing, you kind of forced yourself to learn how to get into the ins and outs of writing and stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
No, that's
Yeah.
that's cool. I think again, that's one of the great things about comic books.
Mhm.
It, it's artist driven, but
Mhm.
I know there's a lot of people that are really great artists, but they can't make their own comic book because
Yeah.
they
It's hard.
don't.
Uh,
I'm not even talking about learning how to write. There are people that just have that are really great artists, but they struggle with just the idea of like sequential images, just
Sequentials.
putting
Yeah.
things in order so that it can tell a basic story.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that is something that it does require a lot of skills in both areas. That it's something that as I said, I think a lot of people kind of miss that sometimes when they're just getting into art and they go, comic book art, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't really understand all that goes into
Oh yeah.
like what it takes to make a really good comic book page.
Yeah, trying to find that one moment in a panel that's gonna give you everything, all the information you need to have in it without any lettering, without any words at all, is a difficult thing to do. And I think now, in the 21st century, as an art teacher and someone who has grown up with the arts, music, and visual alike, I think that it's funny to me that we're still having to try to convince people that the arts are an essential part of the world we live in.
I know.
Don't really. I think it's because most people can't do it, so they see or don't try to do it. I'm sure that most people could do it if they tried.
I think that's it. A lot of people kind of give up at the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
struggle.
yeah, yeah. And that's one thing as a teacher, I try to tell from kindergarten, from the second they walk into kindergarten, I can't do that, Mr. Whalen. I don't know how to do that, Mr. Whalen. I'm like, those two phrases you just said, you'll never say in my room again.
Yeah.
Because yes, you can if you try, and two, I don't know how to. All it means is you haven't done it yet. So do
Mm.
it, continue to do it, continue to get better at it, and you'll learn how to do it. It's simple. People say, "Oh, you were born with such an amazing talent." Well, maybe on some level, my right brain was able to help me to see it a little bit clearer than maybe a lot of left brain people, but
Hmm.
it's hours
Still,
of
yeah.
of work and struggle and learning and failing
And
and
training.
failing. Yeah, and training. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's correct me on the timeline. So you've started doing the Offspring a few years back, and you've been
Yeah.
doing like 5 to 6 issues a year.
Mhm.
That's like really productive. Like
Yeah.
that's pretty great that you've been doing that. How have you been putting the book out there? How have you been distributing it?
So I essentially do most of my business through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
And I do have paper. I was able to print a run of most of the books that I have out. I would say maybe not even most of, because I do a lot of the first 4 issues of the Offspring, and then the trades, and then I
Mm-hmm.
always have copies of the one shots, and then I have copies individually in the trades of the 4 issue miniseries that I put out, and then I
Mm-hmm.
have copies of the 100 plus page graphic novel that I put out. So it's for me, it's always kind of having those print copies ready to go, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to mail them out. But for the most part, I do most of my work through Amazon and through Comixology.
Really? Oh, do you see good digital sales?
I do pretty well. I'm not going to be able to quit my day job anytime soon, but I do. But for a guy sitting in his drawing room in upstate New York,
Mm-hmm.
drawing funny comics, I think I do pretty well. And it's getting to the point now. I was getting to the point where I wanted to make sure I had enough content to be able to try to get it into stores.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very isolated up here where I am in upstate New York. The any comic book shop is an hour away in any direction.
Yeah.
So being able to get to those comic book shops and be able to make sure that they have the content or have the book or have the merchandise or whatever it is very difficult up here. But getting to the point now where I know I've got the content, I've got the confidence, I got it's all there,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to start slowly bringing books to comic book shops. And it's, like I said, an hour away in different directions for all those comic book shops, is going to be tricky. But I think this year, by before Christmas, I want to have my books in some of the shops up here in upstate New York, and then I have contacts and family in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
contacts and family in North Carolina, contacts and family in Florida. That my hope is to be able to get some of those books into those stores also, if nothing else, just to get, again, not to try to be a millionaire, but just to get those different avenues, those different eyes on
Mm-hmm.
books that probably wouldn't be able to see them in other cases.
Yeah, I know that's at the end of the day, like as a creator, like obviously who wouldn't want to make $1 million overnight doing what they love? But
Yeah.
there's that drive that is a little bit more important than that, which is you
Uh,
just you just want your stuff to be seen. That's the
exactly.
hardest thing I think about being a
Yeah.
creator is just getting your stuff out there.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I try to remind myself that there are billions of me.
Yeah.
While my story may be original, maybe, while I have concepts that are very familiar, I
Mm-hmm.
feel the story is different than anything that's out there right now. But there's a guy on the other side of the country, other side of the world, that's doing exactly what I'm doing, and doing their story their way and having a great time doing it, and also finding the same struggles of trying to get eyes,
Mm-hmm.
on their work, and battling off critics and battling off all those things that
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
just come with the territory. So every time I feel, run down or beat down on some level, which isn't much, I'm having a pretty good time doing this. I try to think of that guy in Australia that's doing the same thing. I said, if he doesn't quit, I'm not quitting. And I don't know who
Yeah.
that guy is, but he's not quitting, so I'm not gonna quit.
Yeah. I've often said you have to keep doing it because you just have no choice. Like there's
Exactly.
like stop, you just can't not do it. You just
Yeah.
have to keep doing it. But that's an important point you made too about just how many other people are out there. Because I think it's easy to kind of lose track of the scale of things. Because like you think like you exist in your community, whatever
Mhm.
community you're in. Like I can speak for myself. Like I was in a small community, and I remember as a kid being like one of two people that read comic books. And it's
Yeah.
like I love comic books, and I have a friend that loves comic books, and that's
Mhm.
it. And then it's like, well, I want to go into this, and now you're like the only person that that's kind of into making a comic book.
Yeah.
And you kind of lose that sense of scale where you're like, well, nobody else is doing this, so I'm gonna totally like this is my thing, this is my identity, I'm the guy that does comic
Yeah.
books. And then
Yeah.
you like, thanks to the internet, we can easily connect with people. But like you go
Yeah.
to a comic convention or you go online, and you just see there really are a million other people just like you who are
Mhm.
maybe they're the only person in their small community, but
Exactly.
you don't quite understand how many small communities there are out there
Oh yeah.
and what that amounts to when all of the single people that are interested in comic books come together. It's a
Yeah.
lot of people. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of competition out there.
Yeah, and I try not to see it as competition because there's room for everybody.
Yeah.
And there's lots of different genres and lots of different consumers out there that see,
Mm-hmm.
that may like more than that do like more than one thing. So I think that for me to see it as competition makes it difficult for me, or gives you that, like, again, sense of like weight or
Yeah.
dread about it. I try not to see it that way, even though that's reasonably what's happening. I try to see it as finding people that are like-minded like me.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do think that there, it's always easy to kind of get wrapped up into the competitive nature of art. When you're making a product and you're taking it and you're trying to sell it, but you are always in danger of just losing the artistic sense of what you're doing. And it's always one of those things. I hear it all the time, but it's still good advice. Is you need to just make the kind of comics that you want to read. You got to just be doing what you want to be doing, because the minute you are trying to like game the system to find success, like you're just going to lose it. Like you're going to lose the drive for it, or the art itself is going to suffer because it's not authentic, or you're just going to drive yourself insane because it's either not working and you're not doing what you want to do, so it feels like a waste of time, or maybe it's working, but then you're just going to be stressed out because you're not doing what you want to do, and now you're buried under being forced to do all this stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons why I came into this as the writer and the artist, and really tried to hone the craft of both, because I realized, or maybe working with the independent stuff, I kind of realized that whatever work I was creating from a script, somebody created this, and nobody's going to love their thing as much as they love their thing. Nobody's going to love my thing as much as I love my thing. So going in there and trying to, if I had me drawing it and somebody else writing it, they're going to bring their own ideas that might not jive with what I wanted to do. And then it becomes a big hullabaloo, and you're somewhat suddenly you're making concessions on your vision of the story. And that makes it very difficult to do. I have collaborated with other artists, and I've always found it enjoyable. One of my one-shots, I collaborated with a great guy named Paul Dulski, who does the Everything Horror podcast. And I called him up. I had this idea for a one shot, kind of like my love letter to like 80s slasher movies, Freddy Krueger and Jason, Michael Myers and things. And he was a writer also. He writes movies, produces movies. And I said, let me call this guy and kind of tug his ear a little bit, because I wanted to do all the tropes, but I wanted to do something different also. And I hadn't collaborated with anybody in a few years. So I'm like, let me call this guy. I called him, and within 10 minutes, we had a script, we had a story, we were ready to go.
Oh, right.
And I got off the phone going, I knew I called the right guy. And 2 months later, Sock Hop Killer was out for people to buy, and it's a great book, and something to changing those genres to a horror. And I would say it's not as horror, it's not as R-rated as like the Nightmare on Elm Street and things like that. But it has all those aspects, while doing something again different that I'd never seen in a horror movie like that before, a horror show or horror series like this. So to be able to, going back to what I was saying, to be able to write and draw, I try to remind myself that you're gonna have critics. You're gonna have people saying, "Why did you do that? Well, you should have done it this way. You should have done it that way." And again, try to remind myself that thinking on the biggest scopes possible, that there are a lot of people that like Star Wars, that love Star Wars, but there are a lot of people that hate Star Wars. So so just do your thing. I'm doing my thing, and I love it, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm having a great time. And 30 years from now, my kids will show my grandkids, this is what Grandpa did. This is what great Grandpa did. Here's the book. Read it, and they might go, oh, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen," or they might say, "Yeah, it's all right," or whatever my great grandkids are going to say. And really, that's one of the things that motivates me also, to know that this is a thing that can be accomplished. To be able to show my kids that if you want to do it, go do it. Just go do
it. That's an interesting point, because I have thought about that. I think in the future we're going to see a lot more situations like that than have ever existed before, because I think there's more people now creating art than ever in the entirety of human history. At least in America, for sure. You know what I mean? Like on an independent level, there's just so many people making art. And I think you're going to see that, like, there's going to be things that are passed down from generations. This is their thing.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, and it's awesome that so many people are starting to realize that it's not just for those people, or it's not just that person that's allowed to do it.
Right. It's not just the Disney thing, there's other stuff out there.
Yeah, and we're in such a technological age now that anybody can do it. Anybody, if you have a story, I always make the joke to people who find out I'm a writer, an artist, or publish books, whatever. They say, oh, I've got a story. I'll never be able to get it down. And I always say that everybody seems to have that one story. Everybody's got that one novel in their brain. So if you don't get it down, nobody else will. If you don't get it down, you weren't supposed to. You weren't made to. If you didn't have that burning desire to type at least a sentence every day, then it's just a thought in your brain. It's not anything else.
Yeah. That is totally true, and that is definitely a sentiment that I agree with. We have been going for almost an hour here. Yeah, I know. It flies by when you're talking comics and talking shop about comics. I've noticed. Where can people find your work online?
So links to every book I've ever created is on my website, correcthandedcomics.com. I do a lot of traffic and news and updates on social media, Facebook at Correct-Handed Comics, Twitter and Instagram, comics_handed. I have a TikTok that have been surprisingly enjoying doing videos for.
Oh yeah.
As an old man, it's I got on and go, a lot of people are on the TikTok. Let me just TikTok. I just made myself
true.
old.
Yeah, you already sound old now. The TikTok.
That's exactly. So I made an account and just started making video. They sometimes they don't make any sense. They just it's just a fun thing. And quite honestly, in the less than a year, 6 months that I'm on TikTok, I've gotten some solid followers from just that thing. So
nice.
And I'm correct-handed on TikTok. Most for social media, if you type out correct-handed, I'll probably pop up. But like I said, Facebook and my website are where I do most of my traffic. Again, I think on Facebook I'm aging myself there. I don't think a lot of the kids do the Facebook anymore, but
I know there's somebody is using Facebook, but it's definitely not where the kids are.
Not where the kids are. But hopefully it's because their parents aren't letting them do it, and the parents are on Facebook and they have the money to buy the comic. So get on that Facebook.
Right. Now, do you sell print versions of your comics?
Like I said, I have most of my selling through Amazon, and you can get print copies on Amazon fairly cheap.
Nice.
And I try to make sure that I have sales going on and specials going on to where it's like a buy one get a digital free, or you might be able to get a trade and get 2 digitals for free. Every once in a while on the social media, I will put up hey, if you message me right now, I'll get you a free digital copy of one of my one shots or the first issue of my 4-issue miniseries or something like that. So so your listeners always kind of keep an ear out for that to get a free comic from time to time. Nice. I haven't done it in a while, so maybe I'll do it this week again just to get some feelers out there.
Yeah.
Get some people some free comics. But yeah, mostly. But if people contact me directly, I have had people contact me directly and say, I want a book from you, but I want it signed. So I'll always have a stack of books and get their email or get their mailing address or physical mailing address and send it out to them and sign them. And I'll usually throw some different things and swag in there also to just for fun. So if anybody ever wants to message me directly and say, hey, I'd love a signed book, we can totally work it out.
Cool, man. Well, that's great. Thank you for doing this show. It was a good conversation. I'm always glad to talk to people, and it's always nice to see another creator who's outgoing and
a lot of introverts.
A lot of introverts.
I've been called a lot of things in my life, but introvert is not one of them.
Well, right on, man. Hopefully we get to cross paths at a convention. I don't venture outside of the Midwest too much, but in the future I'm kind of rethinking how I do cons, and I want to start being able to travel more and doing more like vacation conventions where it's like I'll just take a week off and go there and do the con and kind of enjoy myself.
Yeah, with all the weirdness, hopefully winding down in the next year, my plan is to do some conventions in Ohio. There's Gem City Con in Dayton, and I'm sure the Columbus and Cincinnati have cons also.
Yeah.
That I plan on getting a table for and sitting there and watching all the weirdness go by in the best possible way. So yeah, hopefully we'll be able to run our paths across each other.
Right on.
Awesome.
Well, cool, man. Thanks again for doing this. We'll end it
Thank
there.
you, Aaron, very much. I appreciate you having me on. It was great talking to you.
Yep. Hey, everybody. Aaron Walther here, just reminding you that if you like this podcast, please subscribe to the channel. Also, head over to secondthoughtcomics.com to stay up to date on the various comics that I write. For a limited time, I'm giving away a free PDF of my latest graphic novel, The Amoral Stingray. All you have to do is sign up to the Second Thought Comics newsletter. Link is in the description. Thanks for reading.